Welcome back to Real Body Talk. I'm your host, Jennifer Kreatsoulas, coming to you today from Radnor Studio 21. Real Body Talk explores cultural messaging and mental health issues related to body image in the age of social media. Today, my guest is Erin. Erin is a psychotherapist and author of Yoga for the Creative Soul. She is a leading expert in the area of trauma, specifically healing trauma through expressive arts and yoga therapy. On a personal note, Erin is one of my teachers, mentors, and all-around favorite people on the planet. So this is an extra special episode for me. I invited Erin to come talk to us about how expressive arts and creativity can help us understand the voices inside of us that block us from self-acceptance, specifically around body image, our relationship with food, and identity. Welcome, Erin.
Thanks, Jennifer. It's so great to be here today.
I'm so happy you're here. Thank you for making the trip.
Of course. Thank you.
Let's dive into Yoga for the Creative Soul. Please share with me, what is Yoga for the Creative Soul? What is this book about? What is your inspiration? Anything at all?
Yes, I have been applying expressive arts to healing trauma for my entire career and even before my career, 25, 30 years of seeing how beautifully our creative expressions can support us in finding a path to recovery. And what I've come to realize through my yoga practice is that we are all creative in some way. We were created, we're of creation, and that creative force is a true part of all of us.
I have to admit that when I read that in your book, your definition of creativity, right? That because we are of creation, we are creative. That was really eye-opening for me. I can color in a coloring book with my children. I can, cut construction paper and make shapes for them, but I've never thought about myself as a creative person. I enjoy writing, but I'm not a painter. I'm not a drawer. I don't have some of those creative skills. So this was very eye-opening for me. So I appreciate your definition of creativity. Can you define yoga? You brought the term yoga into your response. How are you defining yoga, and how does that intersect with creativity and self-expression?
Yeah, yoga for me is just based on the classical definition that it's the word itself speaks to our ability to connect with ultimate truth, the ultimate truth of ourselves and where we came from, the ultimate truth that's flowing through any given moment in life. And that broadness of definition is what gave me the opportunity to define creativity the way that I do, because we're not just thinking about creativity as being artistic, painting, sculpting, musician, dancer, but how we create our experiences in life and how we create the thoughts and feelings that are with us in any given moment.
And can you share about the use of creativity and expressive arts in your own journey, in your own life?
Yes, so I mentioned sort of growing out of that background, that when I was in groups for trauma recovery or disordered eating recovery groups, that they would so often have us draw our experiences or the different voices in our minds. Or there was one class I participated in where we laid down on a great big sheet of paper and outlined each other's bodies, and then had us color in what were our somatic experiences, what were we feeling in there on all those levels. Because emotions resonate in the cells as well, right? So that taught me quite early on what's possible for us when we use color and movement to get out our emotions and our thoughts, not trying to create a final artistic product, but just to express in some way other than verbal.
So we're talking about not a finished product, right? We're talking about being in progress with ourselves, in process with ourselves, and using expressive arts and yoga philosophies, practices to continue that process, right? To enhance that process, to understand that process, to engage with ourselves in that process.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And through the process of even seeing the way we express through movement, color, sound, it mirrors the way we are growing within ourselves too, changing and integrating day by day, project by project.
Can you give us some context? Can you perhaps give us an example of one of the exercises that you use in your book, or a variety of examples, just so that people watching can get excited about this book and this possibility of being in process with themselves in this way?
Yes, definitely. One of the early things that I'll have my clients do in psychotherapy, for example, a lot of my client base is overachievers, very successful people, which anytime you have a very successful person, you also have imposter phenomenon. For whatever reason, it's only successful people that feel like they're failures and are going to get found out at any given moment. Do I know anybody like that? I think for just a second. Okay. And so that's a big reminder that I bring, right? If you feel this way, it's actually because you're excellent. And to have them when we're having anticipatory anxiety, right? Uh-oh, I have this big project coming up, and how's this going to go for me? Or being in a meeting where we're losing focus or that anxiety starting to build, to just in any meeting at in a conference center, you've got your notepad and your pen they supplied you with, just start to scribble. Just great. If you want to doodle, go ahead and doodle. If you want to go with your non-dominant hand so you're not thinking too much about it, do it that way. But something about that little kinesthetic expression of the nerves versus trying to sit still and be focused in the meeting makes such a difference. And then just as a game afterwards, I'll sometimes say, turn it upside down and see if there's any imagery that comes out of those scribbles. It's almost like your own ink blot test, and there's some information there.
What do you think is the relationship between, the doodling or the scribbling with, bringing your body into some type of motion as you are like receiving information, whatever is coming at you in the meeting? Like, how does that play into kind of what you work on?
Yes, it plays into it. It's really integrated because the nervous system, which is, our fight, flight, or freeze response, is the thing that's telling us we should be afraid or anxious. But when we move, in some ways it gives the nervous system a little something different to focus on, to burn off some of that kinetic energy, some of that stressed out, heart racing energy. And from the yoga perspective, on a smaller scale, I just see that as a flowing asana with the hand as it's scribbling. It's its own yoga posture. The original idea of these yoga postures was to help ourselves remain healthy, notice what's going on in the body, and connect to a deeper level.
I remember when I read your book, there were quite a few exercises around dance, which I found very intimidating, I'll just be honest. Like, oh, yeah, not this one for me.
And in fairness, was that kitchen dance party? Like, hey, nobody's around, put on some music while you do the dishes? Or
no, there's always someone around when I do the dishes.
Fair.
Kids Bop, that's what's kind of popular in our house, Kids Bop. But anyway, so dance I remember that stood out to me. And I know this plays back into the movement, but what were some other forms of expressive arts that you weave into the book and the exercises in the book?
Yes. When I was writing Yoga for the Creative Soul, I actually had a little piece of paper that I carried around with me everywhere. And anytime I thought of an expressive modality, I'd write it on this paper. So pastels, whistling, puppet show, collage with magazine cutouts. I tried to cast as broad a net as possible, because if this is someone who experiences themselves as not being artistic or creative, Yoga for the Creative Soul might sound like it's not their thing. But the intention is to find nonverbal ways of processing old pain and belief systems to get them out of us. The verbal is sometimes a limiting factor.
What's coming to mind for me is, these type of creative practices and how they, I don't know if juxtapose is the right word, but how they relate to the intense amount of images that we are always bringing in, right? Whether it's through social media in general, our eyes are always working.
Right.
right? And when we're being creative, our eyes are working, but in a very different way. I was wondering if you could speak to the value or the power of having this type of imagery, so to speak, in our lives as well.
Because it could be a juxtaposition, right? The imagery that's coming at us from media is incredibly contrived, very well researched. They know exactly what's going to push our buttons and which buttons they want to push. And those buttons aren't of relaxation and self-affirmation. It's about insecurity, so you buy this product. So for me, that is an opposite, sitting beside an opposite. And the creative stuff in Yoga for the Creative Soul doesn't have to be imagery, because sometimes you are just going to want to close your eyes and hum or drum a little beat on the floor. But there is some power in self-created imagery that in its own way is deprogramming the messages that harmed us, and how that can have such an opposite effect to the continual programming that's coming in from the outside world.
I love that. Let's kind of go now to the body image piece, relationship with food piece, and self-acceptance. Yeah. How does what you teach us in your book help us be in process with those aspects?
Yes, the process is continual, and I've done my best in Yoga for the Creative Soul to make it a self-directed journey, even though I'm making recommendations throughout. So some of what happens to us when we're really in that self-loathing is that we have bought into programming from the outside, whether that was, caregivers, teachers, the media itself. We've bought into this social norm that makes us not like ourselves very much. And some of the creative process of unwinding that is to differentiate those voices. What if we made a puppet that represented the voice that tells us we're not good enough? What if we drew on a piece of paper our true selves in conversation with, Ed, the voice of the eating disorder? To separate out who we truly are, yoga, from what is a false self, trains us that every time we hear that false self talking to us, we can answer back a voice of truth.
That is a really powerful exercise that I think there's so many settings that could benefit from that. I'm thinking specifically of, different types of treatment and recoveries, this idea of actually giving shape to a voice, right? Because so often those voices can feel shapeless. They just are like omnipresent.
Or we think they're us.
Yeah. Right. Can you speak a little more on this? Can you share more?
Yes. I have done some really powerful work with people in separating out the voices. And sometimes they really are us, but they're a younger us or a more rigid us or a really wounded us that needs something. Truly believe, even if that is a voice of other, like we think of the monster of Ed, the voice of the eating disorder, even Ed has a need of some kind. So we can just say, listen, get off my back, you're a bully, you're not telling me the truth, and I don't need you in my life. And that can be really effective to have that boundary. Just shut it down every time it starts. Other people need to work through the needs of the voice. Why are you saying these things to me? Where is this coming from? What do you actually want from me? What outcome are you seeking? And sometimes we can pick all the way into it and realize the answer is death, right? It's a suicidal ideation that's just gotten really loud. But maybe once we've picked all the way into, oh, so you're trying to murder me, then we can let it go.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. How do you see these, these voices within translating into the, this might seem like an obvious question, but like the barriers of self-acceptance around our bodies and our view of our right to show up in the world? Yes.
That's huge. But as I think about what you're saying, I can think about the course I've seen many people's expressive works take and how they'll start off very dark and scrambled and out of balance, and in time work their way into multicolored, hopeful, empowered expressions. And when we see that possibility on the page, because remember, nobody's trying to create art here. Not that I'm going to do a landscape. No, we're just trusting what colors draw our attention. And I believe I mentioned it before, but can't say it enough. If you get caught in your own head about this, do non-dominant handwork. And the power of the end product remains. It's not about how it looks. It's about what it says.
And how about for the perfectionists out there watching? You know, the very first episode of Real Body Talk was around the intersection of perfectionism and body image. And I hear you. It's not about the final product. It's not about the landscape or the perfect sculpture. However, sometimes one of the strong voices within is that drive for perfection and the final outcome, and how much, you know, worth gets tied to that. How would you talk to that person? You know, you can like talk to me. How do I do that?
Right. And I remember she told you that's a form of failure, right? That's self-sabotage, because how can we even get started if we're thinking, well, the end product's not going to be perfect? So clients who struggle a lot with perfectionism aren't allowed to use their dominant hand for their work with me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. A. And B, we go back to hopefully an age before that voice was fully formed. And we do work with finger paints or crayons or maybe markers. But by the time kids are using markers, I think the perfectionism has started to sprout already. So non-dominant hand and very young modalities.
Wow. I feel my heart racing thinking about doing that. That is serious.
Because it's not going to look like art. This is going to be a mess. And I said, yes, perfect. Because now there's freedom and information.
Yes. Okay. So something, you know, I'm always interested in, and if for people who watch the show know this, you know, as a mother, I'm thinking, okay, how do I model some of what we're talking about for my children? How do I model self-expression, you know, using expressive arts in the way that we're talking about, so that they feel whole and confident and self-accepting?
Curiosity is probably a big part of that. And the idea of playing creatively, which is how we did it in our house. Let's play creative. And then we would just grab some tissue paper, markers, crayons, popsicle sticks, and just play. And during the process of creating, what are you doing over there? Where do you think that's going to go?
Right.
And it's really funny because a lot of the time the young ones are like, I don't know, I just thought I'd put this here and this there and see what happened.
Right.
And then we can learn from their process.
Them. That's exactly what I was thinking. I was like, wow, you know, actually, we really need to be looking to our children for the modeling.
Yeah.
Right.
They haven't had the chance to close themselves from that yet. Yeah.
So for people who are really curious about tapping into the expressive arts for their own personal journey, whatever that journey is, maybe it's recovering their passion for creativity, right? Maybe it is more along the mental health lines like we've been speaking. Maybe it's an old emotional wound that still feels so fresh, whatever the story is, right? Where to get started? I mean, obviously buy Erin's book, but you know, where to get started?
Yes, the place to start is so different for so many people as well. I remember the recommendation that was made to me was to buy a coloring book and a box of crayons, and this was way before the years of adult coloring books. So I think you have more options now to pursue your interests and find imagery that you'd be interested in coloring, and then go for the modalities that you love, used to love, or have always been curious about. What I endeavored to do in Yoga for the Creative Soul, part of its reason for existence was to give people that next level where they didn't have to color an image that someone else created for them, but could really find their way into some form of expression. And I know we've mentioned that there's a range of expressive modalities touched on in Yoga for the Creative Soul that they can find their way. And then beyond any suggestions of a coloring book or any suggestions that I make in my book, to just trust that you already know what you want to be doing, and then go do that.
I love that. I'm imagining that this book would be wonderful for groups. Like I'm imagining, you know, groups of people who are like-minded, maybe are sharing a similar struggle, or just have reached a point that they want to tap into their creative self. You know, doing this book in a group could be really fun. And I can also see the value in doing this book in conjunction with therapy, right? Yes. You know, with the support of a therapist or some other type of care provider, right? Because stuff comes up.
Yes.
Right? Stuff comes up.
Stuff comes up. That's the point. We're expressing the stuff that's been under the surface. And when we bypass the verbal blocks, and don't get me wrong, there's some writing prompts in here as well, but there's something really powerful about bypassing verbal blocks and going more deeply into the essence of what is creating our repetitive pain patterns.
Okay. All right. Well, I am so grateful to you, Erin, for being here and just enlightening us to what's possible through the expressive arts, through expressing ourselves through creativity, and I think really giving us all permission to go there. Nice. You know, permission to go there, permission to see this as a really valuable tool to enhancing our lives.
Yes.
You know, to enhancing our lives and getting us back in touch with, you know, it's serious, but it's not, right? Like life is so serious.
Right.
And this is saying, yeah, you know, serious things have happened or are happening, and let's tackle it from some fun and colorful angles. And I think there's so much healing in just giving oneself permission
to be playful and to not need to focus on the end result.
Exactly. Yes. Exactly. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you, everyone, for watching Real Body Talk. It was great being with you, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.